Hello there. Welcome to FreeThinking Ministries, a podcast where we want to help people reason together by applying logic and sound theology to all aspects of life. My name is Josh Klein, your host. Joining me is President and CEO and free will thinker extraordinaire, Dr. Tim Stratton. I need to add as many superlatives as possible. But today, we're going to take a look at what astrophysicists have to say about free will.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's their field, right? They're astrophysicists, so they must know about these metaphysical issues, right? I mean,
yeah,
aren't they the experts?
Now, the last time we critiqued Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, which I still haven't forgiven. This Pluto is still heavy on my heart and mind. Right. As I said last time, but the last time we had somebody write in our comments, metaphysician is a made-up term.
Everything's a made-up term.
Exactly. So, anyway, we're going to take a look at a clip. We're going to kind of just jump right in here. They're debating. So Neil deGrasse Tyson doesn't believe in free will, and this other guy on Star Talk, it's a podcast, this other guy does believe, and at least a kind of free will, but we're going to take a look at the arguments on both sides, have some conversations about it, really analyze it. I think it'll be a good time.
Yeah, just let's get back to that comment. Metaphysics is just one's position on, is there anything beyond physics? So if somebody says there is nothing that exists apart from that which can in principle be discovered via physics or science, then that is one's metaphysical position. So I don't, to say that metaphysics is a made up term, it's a term that it's talking about ultimate reality. What is ultimate reality? Is there more to reality than that science can test or discover, or not? And if somebody says, no, there's not, that is one's metaphysical position. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So everybody's got a metaphysical position. Yeah, everybody's got a metaphysical position here. So somebody can say it's made up or not. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
fair enough. All right. So this is a conversation between Neil deGrasse Tyson and Dr. Charles Liu. I don't know if I'm saying that right. But they're talking about free will. Now, I know Neil deGrasse Tyson is at least an agnostic. I don't know much about this Charles Liu guy. I would assume he's probably in the same category. Do you know about him?
I don't know anything about Charles. I really liked him watching this clip. So I'd like to watch more of his stuff. But I really appreciated his attitude, and he seemed to, if he is a naturalist, seems to be saying some important things about reality that would be problematic for his worldview. Regarding Neil deGrasse Tyson, he might be agnostic as far as if there is any supernatural beings out there, but he doesn't believe that there is a maximally great being who's perfect in power, perfect in intelligence, and perfect in love because of the problem of evil. But that was what our past video was addressing, was why Tyson wasn't thinking clearly, and that has led to some incorrect conclusions on his part. So Josh, make sure you link that video here in the description.
Yep. You can check out our other video on Neil deGrasse Tyson and the fact that he gets God wrong on the Impulsive podcast, I think, in the description below. So this is a program called Star Talk. This is a excerpt out of that podcast, and it's an interesting conversation. We're just going to kind of go through the video and see where it takes us. So let me know when you want to stop. Okay, Tim?
All right.
Compare notes.
Okay.
On free will.
Oh, one of my favorite things.
Isn't it?
graphic.
Like it.
Here's my take. It is true that at some level of resolution that we can observe, causality is absolutely true. Given these initial conditions, this is what will happen afterwards.
That's the physicist in
That's the
speaking.
physicist in you speaking. So if you take it to its logical conclusion, then there is no free will because everything is predetermined by things that
Everything has an antecedent.
whether you know it or not, something is causing it to happen.
Something
Right.
precipitated the thing
That's
that
right.
caused the thing
That's
that
right.
made
It's
that.
always
All
good.
right, let's just stop it really quick.
There is
This is really good. They're getting this part right. So they're talking about things being determined. So just let's clarify and define this term analytically and precisely here. So an event is determined if antecedent conditions are sufficient to necessitate the event. So they got this part right. They're talking about prior conditions or antecedent conditions, and they're sufficient to necessitate the event. So this is a cause and effect relationship that we're talking about here. So if determinism is true, or even if we're going to say that there's some indeterminism in the universe, but that everything about humanity is determined, and therefore we don't have free will in a libertarian sense. If everything about us is determined, that means that even if some things aren't determined, or if everything else is determined, but anyway, if everything about humanity is determined, that means that antecedent conditions are sufficient to necessitate everything about humanity. That would include my brain structure, my brain chemistry, neural firings, my body movements. Everything about me would ultimately not be up to me, but antecedent conditions, even things that were around before I was even born. So this is the topic we're talking about now. Is there room for human free will in a strong libertarian sense anywhere in this otherwise what seems to be a cause and effect universe?
Good.
Precipitated the thing
That's
that
right.
caused the thing
That's
that
right.
made
It's
that
always
happen.
going to happen. But
Right.
there is also stochastic uncertainty in the universe. It's built in. There's randomness, there's unpredictability. Yeah. And so you have to ask, I think, if you're a physicist, what level of chaos actually affects you to the extent that you could actually make an instantaneous decision based on other stuff that's not necessarily in your past experiences or what you have just seen in your current environment.
But wouldn't all
Okay. So, yeah. So he's talking about stochastic processes. These would be things typically referred to in the quantum realm or quantum mechanics, where the jury is still out on this. There's a big debate among physicists and philosophers if the quantum realm is deterministic or indeterministic. One thing's for sure, it seems to be uncertain, and they bring up this term uncertainty, but uncertainty on our from our perspective is an epistemic issue, not a metaphysical truth, right? So if something is uncertain from our position, that doesn't mean that it's still not determined by something else, right? So now let's go ahead.
So just to interject. So basically what you're saying is like, I mean, this is the reason the scientific method exists. We can be uncertain how a thing will react, but it could still be determined to react a certain way once we put it through certain tests, and then we figure it out, right? So
Yeah,
just because we're uncertain about something doesn't mean it is also not determined. We just haven't discovered.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And there's multiple different interpretations of quantum mechanics. I've heard up to 11, 12, who knows? Maybe there's more than that these days. But some of these interpretations would be indeterministic. And that means in the quantum realm, that things they don't behave like the macro universe does, but via cause and effect. And one domino hitting another, necessitating its fall, hitting another, necessitating its fall, and on and on and on. So if that's the case with quantum mechanics, I've also heard it said that even if that were the case, their probabilities would still be determined. I'm going to leave that an open question for now, but there's there's some interpretations of quantum mechanics that are fully deterministic. So I co-authored a paper on free will with J.P. Moreland, as you know, and I talk about that quite a bit. And JP's position is that the quantum realm is completely determined. And I take a more agnostic approach on it. I'm open. It could be indeterministic. It could be fully deterministic. I am uncertain about that. But let's, for the sake of argument, grant that the quantum realm is completely random and stochastic and indeterminate. What the physicist here, Charles, is discussing is about making instantaneous decisions. And later we're going to hear him talk about, I think he's going to talk about the football player. And as a former MMA fighter, I've discussed this a lot too. When I enter the octagon back in my youth to fight, I wasn't making a lot of free will choices. And that what I had done though over the course of time is I had trained my body to react, and I'd slow things down in practice. I'm like, okay, well, if this happens, then I need to do X, Y, or Z. And so here's my options. And then I train each one. I'd start slowly and I drill it and drill it and drill it and drill it and start making muscle memory. And then I do the other option. Okay, if this happens, then I'll do this and this and this. And if I can't get out of this hole, then I've got this option that I can do. And I'll drill that and drill it and drill it. And I make more muscle memory so that when things are going live, you know, after we touch gloves and the bell rings and you don't have time to think, you're just reacting. But you've used your freedom to choose how to train prior to that. So there are times then when we don't exercise free will in a libertarian sense, because we have freely chosen to train our bodies in the past. And Charles here is going to touch on this, but when it comes to instantaneous decisions, like he's bringing up right here, I don't know how often we exercise libertarian freedom in the heat of the moment. I'm not going to say we never do, but I'm more concerned about rational deliberation leading to metaphysical knowledge. And so we'll talk about this more as we go forward. So let's keep going.
Yeah, and I'll go forward here shortly, but it seems like he's talking about almost a randomness in
That's right.
decision as instead of being able to take our thoughts captive and reason to a so that's kind of what he's saying is, you know, there could be times where we just randomly do something. We randomly flail and do something that isn't causally determined in the causal chain. So yeah, let's move forward here.
Those past experiences and your current environment, despite the fact that if you're introducing an element of chaos so that you've never experienced this ever before, your experiences that you have had would then inform your decision about the thing that you've never experienced.
Your inform is the word.
Oh,
is it
rather
inform
than
or dictate?
predicate. Right.
Or require. Right. That's the thing. Let's say you're in a room with a whole bunch of audience members. You tell a
I was just saying probably a more precise word to use there is necessitate, or, you know, when he says require or predicate, again, antecedent conditions are sufficient to necessitate. That word necessitate means it cannot fail. Once these antecedent conditions are in place, whatever that is, let's call it X, then Y cannot fail to occur if X is the antecedent condition. So that's what determinism means. Antecedent conditions X are sufficient to necessitate Y. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And another clarity, when he says inform, and he's really camping on that, it's like it's informing what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Would that be similar to how we would use the word influence?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So
it's influence, but it's not causing you to do it. It's influencing how you might respond.
We can't help but be influenced by our you know, the decisions we make, especially our rational and moral decisions, at least at some level, they're always going to be influenced. We can't help it because we're in the world surrounded by things, by competing voices and different ideas and temptations and things like that. And so we're going to have influence. But if we're determined, then it's much stronger than influence. It's our actions are going to be necessitated, forced upon us by things that existed before us. And so if that's the case, then we're that's why we use the terms puppets. We're just in a puppet show, and we're the puppets. And what is the puppeteer? Well, if Neil deGrasse Tyson and his friends are right, and that this robust view of naturalism is true, and that there is no God or soul or anything else, then we're just puppets, and the puppeteer is mindless stuff that knows nothing about physics or metaphysics and doesn't care if we do either, especially regarding metaphysics, and it controls all of our thoughts and beliefs, the entirety of our mental activity. And so that starts to raise undercutting defeaters. But if it's the case that we are merely influenced and even heavily influenced by things, but these antecedent conditions are not sufficient to necessitate the entirety of my mental actions or body movements, then there's still some room for libertarian freedom and for us to be more careful as we think things through. So yeah, let's see where they go from here.
Joke.
Right.
It falls flat. In that moment, you have many things you could do to turn it into a laugh point.
True.
Right? You hear silence and you'd be like, oh, that was good. And everyone laughs. Or, so you make some
Or
sort
is
of
this mic on? That's the old one.
Right.
What do you do? Do you have the freedom to choose one of several choices that you had designed from your past, that you prepared to deal with that eventuality? Or is the choice made for you already?
But if he was less experienced, he might not dig out of that hole
Yes.
as effectively or efficiently.
Exactly.
But if you've been in 100 cases where you had a joke bomb,
Right.
you have data on how to pull out of it.
Exactly.
So statistically, you have a chance of getting people
And it
to
happens
smile.
instantaneously.
Mhm.
You
Right in
don't
the
even
moment.
realize that it's happening.
It's in the
you know?
moment.
So it's
But
in the
yeah.
moment. Right.
Did you have free will to not?
See, that's
So this is all very interesting, but I think it really misses the much bigger point. And I'm going to keep harping on this through this video, I'm sure. But here they're talking about a comedian giving a joke that bombs, right? And so now he's got, the question is, does he have freedom to choose in that split second these different counters to a failed joke to try to save the situation? And again, I don't know if the comedian does, but I don't care that much about how he's going to freely choose in that split second. That's almost like an athletic event where I don't think you're exercising much freedom or libertarian freedom. What I'm far more interested in is, do I have the freedom to reach true conclusions about metaphysical reality, including questions like, does free will exist or does it not exist? When Neil deGrasse Tyson says that free will doesn't exist, he's assuming a lot there in that statement. And that's a metaphysical position as well. It's not a scientific position. Now, if he wanted to say, in this instance here, when domino A hits domino B, striking domino C, these dominoes don't have free will. This is all determined. I'm going to say, yes, the scientist can say that. But when he says humans never have libertarian free will and that everything about us is determined, he's making a metaphysical claim, a universal claim, and it's going to have ultimately some severe impact with with what he's available to do, or what he has access to do. He wants to claim that we don't have free will, but that is going to be damning on his position that he knows what he's talking about when he says we don't have free will. So again, I don't really care about comedians choosing jokes. I care about, do we have the freedom to infer knowledge, to infer truth and gain knowledge about metaphysical reality? And I argue that if we don't, then that means that something or someone else determines all of our thoughts and all of our beliefs about metaphysical reality. And again, if that's the case, what is that? Well, it's going to be mindless stuff that knows nothing about metaphysics and doesn't care if you do either determines all of your beliefs about metaphysics. And that provides an undercutting defeater. That's what in epistemology we call an undercutting defeater that erases your justification on anything regarding metaphysics, including the metaphysical claims that naturalism is true, that metaphysics is a made-up word, that we don't have free will. That will provide reason to doubt all of it. And so it can't be true unless we actually, unless somebody's going to bite the bullet and say, no, nobody has knowledge of metaphysics. But again, that's a metaphysical claim. So it's real, you can't escape it. So even if you know that nobody has knowledge about metaphysics, well, that would be except for you regarding this thing. Well, okay, now we're back to square one. If it's mindless stuff that knows nothing about metaphysics and doesn't care if you do either, then there's reason to doubt that assumption itself. So I don't see a way out of it. We obviously.
What if somebody said, well, I'm not sure that we can know if anyone has or understands the truth about metaphysics?
Well, then I'd say that, it's great that you're not sure about that, but I'd ask, can we how would we get to that conclusion? So not being sure doesn't really get us anywhere. There's a lot of things that we're not sure about. But I'd ask how they reached that conclusion, that even there, how did they reach that point of not being sure? I think it's going to be based on some other things that require some metaphysical knowledge here and there. They're going to be assuming it. Anyways.
Wouldn't it be? It's similar to like what C.S. Lewis said. If the world or if creation didn't have a purpose, it makes no sense for us to have found out that it didn't have a purpose.
Right.
It's kind of a similar thing. When you say you can't be sure. Well, that implies that there is something you could be sure about because you have the language to communicate that there is sureness somewhere.
Yeah. Are you justified in your in your how would we say
ambivalence?
That? There you go. Justified in your ambivalence. That's good.
Yeah. All right. Should we continue?
Let's do it.
Right. So now that would be interesting because here you are in a place where your instinct, your training, and your desire,
10,000 hours, whatever it is,
will, as a reflex, cause you to say this, this, and this. And then people go, wow, that was great. Look how he turned it around.
So, Charles, can I say in that comment that he preloaded his neurosynapses so that in that moment, they all tripped.
Right.
They tripped, meaning triggered, to go to the solution to that problem.
Right.
Same is true.
But then I wouldn't have free will at that point.
That's
it
what
would
I'm
just be a response. What I would have is a response to a situation, not necessarily. I wasn't really choosing that.
It chose it for you.
It chose it for me.
You have 5 choices, and then your system chooses one of the 5
in that
moment, right? And so in that moment, you are.
Okay, I'm agreeing with most of this at this point. When they say, well, then we don't have free will, I just want to say, well, you didn't exercise libertarian freedom in that instance or at that moment.
Doesn't, and then what? Sorry, but doesn't, this is the question I had. When Neil deGrasse Tyson says, well, he preloaded all of these things into his synapses so that when that thing happened, it snapped into focus. Well, yeah, then that choice wasn't free will because he preloaded it. But when you say he preloaded
it,
then that implies he reasoned, he wrote down, he figured out different things to do, he practiced, like you said with your MMA fighting.
That's exactly right.
Is that where we're going with that?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So this comedian here, he exercised libertarian freedom preparing for a moment like that. So yeah, it makes sense to say that he preloaded it. But who preloaded it? Did he do it, or was it antecedent conditions that know nothing about comedy and don't care if you do either? No. If we're gonna say that the comedian, was the source of the preloading of these alternative responses, then he's exercised libertarian freedom to prepare for a moment in which he might not have it. And our justice system recognizes this today. Why do we hold the drunk driver responsible when he runs over the pedestrian? Because the drunk driver, let's just say he doesn't remember a single instance of it. Let's just say he's lost the exercise of libertarian freedom. He is completely determined by antecedent conditions at this point. Well, why do we still hold him responsible? Why does he still go to jail? Why is that the right thing to do? It's because he was responsible for at least part of the antecedent conditions that were sufficient to necessitate the future running over the pedestrian. He was responsible for the first drink and the second, probably the third drink, until finally the drinks took control of him. He freely surrendered his libertarian freedom. To make it theological, I like to say that we often freely surrender the image of God in which we were created, or we freely tarnish it with choices like that. We violate it. So we lose the libertarian freedom that we have because we're created in God's image. So we use that freedom to destroy our freedom. And when we do that, bad things can happen. And that's why the drunk driver is still held responsible, even though he didn't have free will in that moment.
Yeah. And on the other side of that, you have the reason we hold people who pre-plan murders even more liable. Because they've exercised some sort of libertarian freedom in which they create a plan in which to carry out the murder, rather than we still hold you liable for manslaughter, but this isn't first degree murder. Even in our justice system, we recognize that.
Think about this. If there's no free will along the way, then why would it make sense to be harsher on the person who has planned out the murder over a person who just reacted spontaneously in the heat of the moment and killed somebody, and still murdered the person, right? But if there's no free will, then who cares if he was planning it first? It wasn't up to him. Those plans weren't up to him. Physics and chemistry were just running the show the entire time.
Not exercising free will. Did you set it up, though, with free will in the past so that you could react this way deterministically? But
and this is what we just said.
That's
we
right.
Should just kept letting it roll.
Yeah, I like this guy. Let it roll.
Yep. You actually were in control of the circumstance. Right. Here's another physical example of that. A football player is trying to sack a quarterback. The quarterback jukes left. The person trying to sack the QB doesn't have enough time to think about whether to move left or right or up or down. It has to react based on years of training and practice and experience. So in that moment, that action is not free. But in the setting up of that moment, if it was free enough, does that constitute free will? From a physics perspective, it might not. Then again, from a psychological point of view or from a biological point of view, it might.
I just got up there.
I guess that's a good place to take a break. First of all, I don't think that was a quarterback that we saw, was it?
No, that was definitely a running back.
That's what I thought.
So there's plenty of quarterbacks that juke and move. We could have found a better clip, but I don't think physicists maybe watch a lot of football, so maybe they should have chose a different.
Right. Yeah. No, I think he's Charles here is on the right path. Now he said from a physics perspective, maybe not. Well, I don't think this is a physics question at this point, unless you're going to assume that everything about you is nature, right? Now that would be the naturalist position. If you're going to make the assumption that everything about you is nature, and that is stuff that is, at least in principle, testable or discoverable via scientific means, right? If you're going to assume that everything about the person is nature like that, made of natural stuff, then I don't see how we can have free will in a libertarian sense. It seems like either deterministic processes are going to determine things about me, or antecedent conditions that are indeterministic are going to wind up determining things about me. Either way, it's all stuff that's happening to me. And as C.S. Lewis said, reasoning doesn't happen to us. we do it. So the question is, and C.S. Lewis is really making a case here for the argument from reason, and ultimately pointing to the existence of the soul, because and a soul created in the image of the immaterial creator of the universe. If Christianity is true, this is what we would expect, that there would be an immaterial God, a maximally great being, creator of all things, and that we would share in his likeness. And so since God's not a physical body, contra what Mormons often say, God is a physical body. We aren't either, but we have physical bodies. Now, it seems to me that my physical body is completely determined by, I can't escape gravity, for example. But if there's any part of me that is not determined by physics and chemistry, then that would be, that seems to be supernatural. Right. And so I think it is evidence. The fact that I can reason to metaphysical truth and gain metaphysical knowledge means that there is more to me than just the physical. So yeah, So anyway, Charles here is saying that it might not answer the question regarding physics, but I don't think that physics is the right tool for the job at this point. It's not. Unless you're
but then he said something about biology.
I don't think that's
to me that would. I know biology and physics are different fields of study, but you're talking about nature.
Yeah.
If you have a naturalistic mindset, then the biology is just informed by the physical world anyway.
That's right.
So
yeah, biology isn't going to save him there. He needs to realize that he's got to get out of the science, of pure science here, the study of nature.
Yeah.
The study.
His other option was psychology, which got closer, because now we're talking about what consciousness.
Consciousness.
And then I think psychology, now you have to decide, are you your brain or are you not? And we've talked a lot about that. So it'd be interesting to hear what he would have to say about that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Can't hear Neil. I don't need you to. It could be this, it could be that, and I'm right both ways. Whichever the actual answer is, I was right.
Yeah. Well, he's saying I don't really have the free will to make that determination. I'm going to be right or wrong.
Let's just ask an opinion. In my opinion, I would like to have free will exist in this universe, even though philosophically it can be argued that it does not exist.
Are you happy with a world where you perceive free will, even if it isn't?
Maybe. This has to do with the movie Arrival, right? Starring Amy Adams, where if you know how your future is going to turn out, would you like to live your life anyway? Right? Mm-hmm. And the answer is yes, I would. But I still would like to think that the future is not yet predetermined.
No, but it's different. I'm not saying it's predetermined and you know it. Mm-hmm. I'm saying, would you still be happy with life if some alien said, look, dude, your life is predetermined. There's nothing you can do about it. Keep on believing you have free will. And then they go back to their planet.
You're a puppet on a string.
A puppet on a string.
That's
from free will.
You're a free will puppet on a string.
What I would say in that case is that I would hope that the knowledge that I have that puppet on the string circumstance allows me to circumvent it. I can find a way. If it's.
Hey, we hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. Hey, please do us a favor. Check and see if you're subscribed. If you're not, a lot of you aren't, but if you're not, please subscribe, hit that notification bell. We'll get back to the episode in just a second, but we can only exist also because of viewers like you, people who support our channel. So you can go to freethinkingministries.com/donate and you can be a part of the team. We'd love to put you on our email list as well. Okay, now back to the conversation.
If he has knowledge of what's determined and then he has the power to not do it, and so he could avoid what was otherwise determined, then it wasn't determined in the first place because he has the ability to choose otherwise. And so he's not in the chain of deterministic causes at this point. He has the power to step out of it and make something else happen, the power to do otherwise. And that's not just something we call free will. That's called libertarian freedom. And that's free will in the strongest sense possible. So yeah, knowing how a system is determined to play out, but then saying, but I have the power to choose otherwise and to make it different, then antecedent conditions were not sufficient to necessitate the ending in the first place. And so we're looking at a scenario where things were maybe influenced but not determined. So just the way that he responded to the question is nonsensical.
Yeah. Well, doesn't it almost feels, let me know if I'm not picking this up right, but it seems like they are accidentally participating in a modal fallacy here, because he brings up the aliens knowing what your future is and then you can't avoid it. Well, again, we've established many times knowledge isn't causal. So even if an alien has looked into the future and seen all of the actions that you will do and then says, these are all the things that you're going to do, that doesn't mean that those things were predetermined. You could have maybe still done otherwise. They just saw into the future that, you know, that you would do those things, and that you will do those things, not that you were necessarily determined to do those things. And it seems like they're conflating the two. Am I misreading that?
I don't know. I mean, just what you said made me think of David in the Old Testament when he asks God if he should stay in, is it Kyla? Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Or if he should get the heck out of Dodge or whatever. And basically God tells him, hey, if you stay, the men of Kyla are going to give you up and you'll eventually be
and Saul
killed.
will come down and yeah.
So here basically that saying, if you stay here, things are going to play out that it's not good for you. So David gets the heck out of Dodge and he I mean, in a sense you can say he would change things by leaving. So here we see that in that scenario, David's endings weren't determined there because God let him know what would happen either way. Now to your question, what was your question again?
Well, I just wondered if they were conflating knowledge with causation. In this example.
Yeah. So God had knowledge of what would happen if David stayed there, and it didn't make him stay there. In fact, David had the freedom to leave. So knowledge. And again, here's a way, I like to run this thought experiment. Let's say I got a time machine and I went 10 years into the future, watch the World Series, and I see that the Kansas City Royals win the World Series in 2036. Come back home. Now I know who's going to win the World Series in 10 years, but does my knowledge of it make it happen? Of course not. It happened apart from my knowledge in the first place. I just now back in time, I know what's going to happen, but knowing it doesn't make it happen. So knowledge does not stand in causal relation. And you're right. You're exactly right. This is a modal fallacy that is committed over and over and over again by so many people now, even including astrophysicists. So
because it seems like that's what Charles is hinting at when he says, well, if I knew the future, then maybe I could change it. But if you knew the future and it was determined, you couldn't.
You couldn't change it. Yeah, you'd be a falling domino.
Yeah. So he's hoping that knowledge would somehow give him the power to do otherwise. But really, the only way that knowledge could give him the power to do otherwise is if he already had the power to do otherwise, and then he's given the knowledge, like David.
Right.
Hey, he already had the power to either stay in Kyla or leave. And now he already had that power. God gives him the knowledge to which he can make his decision.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Right? You've seen so many Greek mythology stories where you try to avoid the fate of whatever the gods have
destined. The act of avoiding it
is what makes it happen.
Like Oedipus, for example.
Oedipus
right.
would be the most
famous
egregious example.
Sorry.
So the bottom line is, yes, I would still be satisfied with trying to do something different, because even the illusion of trying to do something different is in itself a form of free will. Physics-wise, though,
it's not.
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So Neil, if you had to right now decide that free will does exist or doesn't exist, what would you prefer?
My thinking over the recent years, because I didn't used to think about this at all, my thinking over recent years is leaning towards the absence of free will for practically everything we think and do in our lives. And I base that on the fact that over time, things that we have done as people in our species at one time was you are totally to blame for that, or something you did or something we've learned, no, this person is more susceptible than you are to addiction.
Right.
There's a biochemistry there. This person cannot just be made the life of the party because they're on the autism spectrum. They don't control that in the way you might think they should, just because you're the life of the party. As you add up all of these things, let's go back to epilepsy, where before that was even a word, you were occupied by the devil. Did you do something bad? Or, well, you knew it was not, everyone knew you were not in control of it. But today, no one is saying, did you have the free will to not have an epileptic seizure? Of course not. Do you have the free will to not be depressed? The person who's ready to jump off the bridge, in that instant, do they have the free will to not jump off the bridge? I don't think so. And the more I add up and explore the human condition, I'm forced to conclude that the direction we are headed is that we are all products of an absence of free will. And as a result, society needs more compassion for people who do not otherwise fit in.
All right.
I have a
So
feeling I know where you're going to go here, but
we'll see. We'll see. Please add to this. But a few things. Tyson says that practically everything is determined or something along those lines, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, is it everything or not? Is what I ask him. I can agree. I think most things in my life, I'm not exercising libertarian freedom on a moment by moment basis. There's so many examples of things that happen to me, right? Rather than me being the source of those things. So again, if Tyson's going to say, well, practically everything is determined, I'm like, okay, but are some things not determined? Are there some things that are actually up to me? Am I the source of some of my mental activity or some of my body movements, even a little bit? And if so, then determinism is false, because determinism is typically used to mean exhaustive, right? That everything, at least about humanity, it depends on the context of what it's talking about here. But when people are talking about determinism, they mean either everything in the universe is determined, which would include quantum mechanics, or oftentimes you'll see people saying, well, at least everything about humanity is exhaustively determined. But if Tyson's even willing to grant a little bit here, to say, well, most of the time I don't exercise free will, but practically everything is determined. Okay, well, even if there's just a little bit of me having opportunities to exercise an ability to choose between a range of options, at least two, that are each compatible with my nature at that state of affairs of choosings, then I've got libertarian free will. So libertarian freedom. Now he brings up things like epilepsy. Well, of course, if somebody is an epileptic and they start a seizure, they can't freely choose to just stop. Nobody argues that, right? We're talking about really what I want to ask Tyson here is, you've come to the conclusion that there is no freedom, that humans don't have freedom, that everything is determined. Well, did you exercise the freedom to reach that conclusion? Or did something or someone else determine that for you? You either actively reasoned as the source. You are either the reasoner who is actively thinking about these things, reaching your own conclusion, or, as C.S. Lewis noted, reasoning is happening to you, right? And you are merely experiencing sensations of deliberatings or of reasonings, but you aren't actually doing it. No, it's happening to you. And what is causing this? It's physics and chemistry on this naturalistic view. It's mindless stuff that knows nothing about free will and determinism and doesn't care if Neil deGrasse Tyson does either. Well, if that's the case, then why should Neil trust his own thoughts on this topic? In epistemology, epistemologists would tell Neil deGrasse Tyson, say, look, you're saying these things, but based upon everything you're saying, you've got an undercutting defeater, which erases justification for what you're concluding. And that means you don't know it. You can't know it. When you say, no, we do not have free will, or all things about humanity are determined, that's not something you could know. And so it just becomes self-defeating to take Tyson's position. Charles is right. He's hoping that we have room for libertarian freedom in this universe. His hopes are warranted because I think he's starting to see the bigger picture and the problems that come along with not having it. I would argue that not only are we not morally responsible, we're not rationally or epistemically responsible if we're not free to think. And I would argue that ultimately, you're not free to experience love in the greatest sense. But I spend most of my time focused on morality and rationality, namely rationality, or what I call epistemic responsibility here. And I think Charles is right. He's saying, man, we've got to have room for libertarian freedom or else nothing makes sense. And so he's hoping for it. But I want to say, dude, if it's true that you're a naturalist or a robust naturalist that believes that only the stuff that can be tested or discovered by scientific means exists, or as Alvin Plantinga once said, naturalism is the view that God and things like God do not exist. It's only the stuff that can be tested by a science. If that's Charles's position, then his hopes, he can hope all he wants, but he doesn't have good reason to think that we probably have it. But if there's more to metaphysical reality than just the physical, if God does exist and we are created in his image, as creatures who can actually gain knowledge about metaphysics, which makes sense if Christianity is true, by the way, because we would have the God of truth, John 14:6, who desires, or who are created. Okay, so we'd have the God of truth, John 14:6, who creates humans in his image, Genesis 1:26, so that we can know the truth that sets us free, 1 Timothy 2:4, so that we can reason together, Isaiah 1:18, and take our thoughts captive to obey reality, 2 Corinthians 10:5, before bad thinking takes us captive, so that we can be transformed by the renewing of our minds, Romans 12:2. Just go on, so that ultimately we can know the truth about metaphysical reality. If Christianity is true, we would expect to be the kind of beings who could do metaphysics and reach conclusions like free will exists or it doesn't exist. But if atheism is true and we're just these passive cogs ultimately being acted upon by physics and chemistry, then we wouldn't expect to be the kinds of creatures who could gain knowledge about metaphysical reality. So I see what Charles is saying here, and I think Charles's hopes and his longings are in the right place. But if he's a naturalist like Neil deGrasse Tyson seems to be, he doesn't have reason to hope.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd also add that I think one of the problems with Neil's position is, well, first of all, the question's funny because Charles asked him, would you desire free will? It's like, well, what does that even mean if you don't believe
if I'm determined to desire it, I'll desire it.
Yeah, but it's interesting because it's not exactly a one-to-one comparison, but Neil does something that I call arguing from the margins. People do this in the abortion debate, in the sexuality debate, to say, well, humans don't have free will because epilepsy, because autism,
Right.
because a predilection to addiction. And I say, yeah, but the reason we've discovered all of those things, that they exist, is because that's not normally how humans should act or behave. That's not, that predilection to addiction is bad, is not good for that person.
Yeah.
They should be able to avoid that addiction if they're able to apply self-discipline and stay away from those substances. The person with epilepsy, that's not how, yes, they can't just stop having the seizure, but that's not how their bodies are designed. Same with autism, the inability to have social functions and to respond to social cues in a certain way. Yeah, that's just, so you're arguing from the margins to then say, well, that means all of humanity doesn't have free will. And I just don't think it works that way. You have to make a more robust case than look at all these exceptions. It's the same thing Calvinists do with like, well, God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and God caused Nebuchadnezzar to act like an animal for 7 years. Be like, Well, that's the exception. That's because that's not normally what happens. So you can't, when you argue from the exceptions, it's actually starting to work for my point of view, in my opinion. And then he caps all of that off with, I think because of that, we should have more compassion for all of these people that
what
are
do you
on
mean
the
by
outside.
should? What does
Yeah,
should
and I would
mean?
say, and I would say, yeah, I think we should have compassion for people that have addictions, for people with autism, for people with epilepsy. We should try to take care of them. But the question is, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
If you don't think, like, how should we do that?
Right.
If we don't have libertarian freedom to be able to bracket our biases and say, you know what, that isn't someone that's demon possessed, they need medicine. You know what, that sort of thing. So I think even in his response, it's kind of trying to have it both ways. Well, humans don't have freedom because of all these other things, but also we should exercise our freedom into incorporating these people into society.
Yeah.
That's what I would add.
Yeah. And when he says, well, we ought to have compassion on these people because they don't have free will. Well, hold on a second. Ought implies can.
Yeah.
It can means ability to do it or not. Now, if determinism is true, if we don't have this freedom or this free will in a libertarian sense, then if people experience sensations of compassion, that's not up to us. It's up to physics and chemistry, these antecedent conditions sufficient to necessitate all things about us. And so when Tyson talks about shoulds or oughts here, that doesn't make sense. He's saying we have no free will, everything is determined, so we should be compassionate. Those two statements contradict each other. In theology, we call this not having a good systematic theology. He's not having a good systematic understanding of metaphysics here, because he's making two claims that do not work together. You have to have both of them work together to have a coherent understanding of reality. And so as soon as he says we ought to be compassionate to those who don't have free will, well, okay, there are people that have lost their free will and we should be compassionate to them, but we should be, and that means we're not determined to be to not be compassionate toward them. That means we can be compassionate, and that is evidence of libertarian freedom.
I would agree.
See, I have the exact opposite position in my own mind. I feel that it is because of the absence of free will that you see in most behavior, that it is that 1% of free will activity that moves us in the right direction, bends us toward compassion, takes the arc of history toward justice.
But but going back to what Neil just said, there are people who actually suffer from personality disorders, that suffer from brain disorders, where they can't do what you just said. They can't express compassion. They can't move
there
towards
was a day when no one even thought to analyze it that way, as a brain disorder.
Yeah, you were just an a-hole.
Yeah, exactly.
That was it.
Now, if they can't, you can. You can show that person compassion or understanding. And therefore, free will as an entity exists.
Charles, you're drawing a line that I have seen be in constant motion over the decades and over the centuries. That line that you're saying, they don't have free will, but I do. I don't know that I can.
See, I have free will over some things and not over others. Okay. Someone can see me and say, that person needs help in this way and has the free will to help me. I see somebody else who needs this help and free will. Together, it is a network. It's not that any individual.
So you have to draw the line for every individual and even perhaps for society.
Okay.
Does the criminal who's born in poverty have free will to not be a criminal if most of the people in prison came in below the poverty line? So there's some sociological force operating there.
So
where we are less susceptible to that force.
I think that's
all right. Does the criminal have free will if he's born into poverty? Well, I know a lot of people born into poverty who are not criminals.
Yeah.
I also know some people who were born with tons of money who are criminals and are horrible people.
Most of them are in politics.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. So I don't think this is a good illustration whatsoever. The question is, well, why is it that some people born in poverty, in fact, I would say probably most people born in poverty aren't in prison? It's because they're making hard but free choices. And similarly, like we said, there's so many people that we would consider very wealthy who are either in prison or deserve to be in prison. And actually maybe there'd probably be more people in prison if the wealthy people couldn't buy the best lawyers in the world. So that'd be part of it too. But anyway.
Yeah.
And
I think Charles,
yeah.
I think Charles kind of pointed out some of the things that we said. And if you take a look, I think, at the two positions, he is talking less in circles than Neil deGrasse Tyson is.
Yeah, definitely.
Like he's recognizing the issue.
Mm-hmm. He does.
A great question, analogy. Let's say this. Say those folks who have been branded criminals by our society are incarcerated.
Yes.
We can then, who we're fortunate enough not to face those same circumstances, who are not incarcerated, can look at these incarcerated people, and instead of saying we must keep them away from society, welcome them back.
So that's called restorative justice.
Yeah, and that's a free will example of the exercise of free will
of society
toward individuals who may not have had the options, had the life experience to recover from a bombed joke.
I saw an old movie where there's a guy who was a junkie, right? And he needed help. But they said, no, the cops came and arrested him because he was a junkie. Right. Today, you wouldn't do that.
Right.
You would say the person needs help.
They need, right.
Even if that person had robbed somebody, that person needs treatment. And the people who cannot shake whatever it is that afflicts them tells me that free will cannot be as free as we think it is. Do you remember the shooter?
Free will can't be as free as we think it is. I need him to define that for me. And tell me what he means by that. I think a better way to say it is, no, we exercise instances of libertarian free will throughout our lives. And then oftentimes we don't have those opportunities to exercise those abilities. So for example, if the junkie just called and said, hey, I need help me, I don't want to be a junkie anymore, and then they come and arrest him, well, that'd be bad if that was the entire story. But if the guy freely chose to do drugs and until he became addicted, now he's responsible for his current state. And then let's say he went on a mass murdering rampage, and then he called and said, help me, I don't want to be a junkie anymore. He deserves to go to prison, right? Even if he didn't have free will at the time of the murders, he was still responsible. And we talked about this earlier with the drunk driving case. Now I think they're going to talk next about the shooter in Texas, I think. So let's watch this.
Okay.
In University of Texas at Austin.
I remember that.
Okay.
One. Yeah.
There's a movie they made out of it called The Tower, where he left a note saying, I just want to kill people. Something must be wrong with my brain. Please, when I die,
look into this.
They look, and there was a tumor putting pressure on a part of it. In fact, that's how we learn anything about how the brain works when you have situations like this.
Person had the free will to write a note. He had the free will to write the note. So he did not have the will to resist shooting. But that's the line that you were talking about is a partial one.
Why isn't that line always in motion as we learn more and more about how the mind works?
Okay,
so then maybe it's a line of convenience today, but tomorrow we're going to find out, oh my gosh.
So I don't know if, let's just assume this shooter and he had the tumor in his brain. Let's assume it took over it destroyed his brain, so his soul can no longer use it. So at this point, it would be like Mozart trying to play a piano that was completely destroyed, right? He doesn't have the power to think clearly at this point. And Mozart, although nothing wrong with him in particular, doesn't have the power to play beautiful music. It's going to be ugly if he even tries at this point. So I think that's, Sir John Eccles, Nobel Prize winner, neuroscientist, who was arguing for the existence of the soul, gave this kind of an example. But back to this Texas shooter, suppose he didn't even have the freedom to choose to write that note or not. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But I can, for the sake of argument, say, well, I don't know, if the tumor took over, let's just say he something went wrong here, and he lost his ability to freely do anything. And so that if that's the case, and let's say that this shooter then was arrested, I think, and let's just say that we found out why his body was moving like that. He should still be arrested, and imprisoned. But if it were truly the case, and we knew the whole story, that he wasn't responsible for anything up to that point, and that he didn't, that he lost all freedom, and I say, well, he needs to be in prison then for the sake of safety, right? But I could at least say, well, gosh, and let's just say it wasn't a brain tumor. Let's just say somebody else, a mad scientist, took over his brain, implanted some microchips in his brain while he was sleeping and then activated him. So now he's a puppet. And so his body is going through these motions and picking up the rifle and pulling the trigger and shooting people. But even though it's his body at that point, he's not responsible. And so if you could prove in court of law that, no, it was a mad scientist that did this to me, it happened to me, and I was just a passive cog, and I was a victim myself, even though there was other victims that the people that my body, or that the rifle that my body was using, shot. I was a victim myself. I didn't have a free will, a choice in this. It's all the mad scientist. So that's why the mad scientist should be arrested in that scenario. But yeah, what would you add to this, Josh?
Well, I think it's also note. I like Charles saying, well, he had the free will to write the note, and one of the things I would say is he had also the ability to recognize that something was wrong.
Right.
To say there's something wrong with me. I should be able to resist this, but I can't.
That's true. I didn't think about that.
I think that maybe that kind of runs contrary, and so then what Neil is doing is saying, well, you know what? It's kind of like the whole God of the gaps charge. He's trying to do free will of the gaps, I think it seems like, because he's like, well, you're saying that line is moving, so maybe in 10 years we'll find out a scientific reason why people do have moral beliefs on these issues, and then we'll find out for sure that free will doesn't exist. But I think this is a category error. There are some things that science can't study, like
because it's metaphysical.
Yeah,
this is a metaphysical issue.
Because he's a metaphysician, he's not a metaphysician. So I think he's trying to do the same thing. But those psychological states, like you've seen, these are issues. These are deep issues that even naturalists are starting to recognize. They need to figure out something like panpsychism or Bernardo Kastrup's, the mind is essential to the universe or what have you. Is that his name? Bernardo? Did I say that right? So anyway, I think he might be equivocating a little bit in the conversation, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Just to your point, if you can write a letter stating that what you're doing is wrong, then why couldn't you pick up the phone and call 911 and say, somebody please come get me? So I see that point. Ultimately, since we're talking about metaphysics here, and unless you're going to be left with mindless stuff that knows nothing about metaphysics, determining all of your thoughts and beliefs about metaphysics, which leads to undercutting defeaters, which erases metaphysical knowledge altogether, we can't have that. So we have to have libertarian freedom, the libertarian freedom to think. And I argue that the best explanation of that is not just theism, but specifically the biblical account of reality. Now, there's nothing logically impossible in a strict sense with saying that naturalism is true and we have libertarian freedom. There's no contradiction there, like saying the triangle has four corners. There might be something broadly logically impossible with that statement, but let's grant that it's not impossible, that naturalism could be true and we could still have libertarian freedom, and that we can find a scientific reason for libertarian freedom. I'll say fine. I think the better explanation is theism, but even if you're committed to, no, God can't exist, maybe because of the problem of evil, like Neil deGrasse Tyson thinks. Again, see our past video talking about why that's wrong. But if you're for some reason committed to the idea that God can't exist, we've got to have libertarian freedom, so we're going to find a scientific explanation of why we have libertarian freedom, I'd say, okay, fine. At least you've got a view that allows you to think freely about these topics. And so mindless stuff isn't determining all of your views. I just don't know if you can make sense of it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, in a naturalistic world. So that's why I say I think it's broadly logically impossible for that to be the case. And even if that weren't the case, it's still easy to argue, well, a much better explanation is theism, substance dualism, and the existence of the soul, an immaterial aspect of human existence that is therefore not determined via antecedent necessity, given physics and chemistry.
Yeah. Got a few more minutes. Let's get through there and then we'll end it.
That person has no real free control over their behavior, over their personality, over their tendencies, over their treatment of others.
It's not a line of convenience. It is, in your words, a perimeter of ignorance. When Newton said we couldn't explain certain things,
right?
God must have done it.
Of course.
That's a God of the gaps.
Of course.
That delineates what we don't know. The line you describe, I hope, is in fact that perimeter of ignorance which we slowly are moving toward and moving so that we do understand what the true nature of free will is.
So this is where people will push back. Most people are concerned not about the actions, but the consequences. So what they're thinking about is the punitive response to someone who does something wrong. And is a punitive response a deterrent for somebody doing something wrong or doing something wrong in the future?
Especially if they don't have the free will.
Right.
So there's the other side of this entire analysis is how does society interact with people who are being brought into the circle day by day? We're learning what we have control over and what we don't, biophysiologically, intellectually, emotionally.
Yes.
Why do people need anxiety meds? Do they have the freedom?
He's saying what we have control of and what we don't. Do we have control over some things? He's saying day by day we're learning what we have control of and what we don't. You're sounding like a libertarian there, Neil deGrasse Tyson. If you have any control over anything, including some of your ultimate conclusions about ultimate reality, then you're not a determinist. You are affirming at least that there's some times in human experience or some times in our lives when we experience or don't just experience things, but we have opportunities to exercise these powers to choose one way instead of the other and to be the source of our thinking.
Yeah, and you're at least affirming some form of compatibilism.
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, it's more than that. Compatibilism is the thesis that some kind of free will other than libertarianism and or moral responsibility is compatible with determinism. So if we're saying things are determined here, then we don't have control over anything. Yeah. So sorry to pick on you there. It's just
I just think that would be the natural response that people would have is
they'll say the word compatibilism, but they're going to use it incorrectly.
But it's compatibilist. I mean, because I'm with you on the conclusion that you're reaching. I'm just saying, I think that's what people would maybe respond with. That might be even what Neil deGrasse Tyson would respond with. It's like, no, there's some sort of compatibilistic framework here
so
that we just don't quite understand.
As soon as I hear that word thrown out there, in fact, the first appendix of my forthcoming book, Human Freedom, Divine Knowledge, and Mere Molinism, coming out any day. In fact, it might even be out before this video is released. I don't know. But the first appendix in that book, I've got 7 appendices in that book. The first one is all about compatibilism. And so the title of that appendix is Compatibilism. What do you mean by that? And most people use the term incorrectly. But a lot of times when people say, well, free will is compatible with determinism. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by free will? Well, I have real ability to choose one way or the other, and determinism can still be true. I'm like, well, that's not true. If determinism is true, then you're determined to only do one thing and you can't do the other. So yeah, that word is thrown around all the time, but it's not going to work if things are determined. I also thought it was interesting that the guy in the middle, he kept talking about doing something wrong. And I would want to ask him, what do you mean by wrong?
Yeah.
Are you talking about things that are really wrong in an objective sense? And
how do we get to the moral ought?
Yeah, right. It seems to me that as soon as, I mean, these guys are talking about free will, these metaphysical, this metaphysical powers that we have or do not have, and then things that are really right and wrong, things that we ought to do, we ought to be compassionate. I mean, this is that stuff. All of those claims make sense if Christianity is true. It doesn't make sense if atheistic naturalism is true.
Absolutely. Let's close it out here. I don't know how much longer this is, but
because
they have children. That is why. That is why I'm telling you, I'm taking them every day, and I got 3 reasons that I take them every day.
Some kids need them because they have parents.
Oh,
I'm just saying.
Very nice. Very nice.
Okay, so Charles, if we're going to exit this conversation, if we find a point of agreement, it's that this perimeter of ignorance, we recognize inside the perimeter there are forces operating against free will.
Yes.
Our physiology, our neurochemistry, and physics.
Yes.
That surely that perimeter may grow.
Yes.
But it's possible that there's a limit to how far it will grow.
Yes.
Beyond which we have to admit the existence of free will.
Yes.
Okay, I'll give you that.
There
very nice.
we are.
That's a great job.
It doesn't have to be absolute in one direction or another.
It's a bit more fluid. Okay.
And I'm okay with that. There is uncertainty in the universe. I embrace it.
I'll tell you this much. I've been married for 20 plus years. I do not have free will.
On that note.
I think that's basically the end of the conversation.
That was good.
That was funny. That was funny.
Yeah.
So,
what was the last thing you said? We don't have to have certainty one way or the other? Or what did he say?
yeah, let me look at the exact wording that he used.
Yeah.
Because that doesn't sound exactly right.
No, I don't think he said.
But I thought it was interesting because it was like, well, both can be true. This is why I was trying to get to the compatibilism thing. And he talks, the perimeter of ignorance, and we might grow so much where, well, I guess we have to affirm some sort of free will. He says it's possible there's a limit to how far we'll grow beyond which we have to admit the existence of free will. And then he says, this is what he says. It doesn't have to be absolute in one direction or another. It's a bit more fluid.
Here's the case based on the logical law of excluded middle. Determinism is true or it's not.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, and we can say it be even more precise here. All things about human mental activity are determined by antecedent conditions or they are not. Okay, it's one of the two. So we do have to have, what was the word he used? Absolute?
Absolute.
Yeah. There is an absolute here. Here's another one. Humans occasionally exercise libertarian free thinking or they don't. Right? It's one or the other. There's no middle ground here. So to the chagrin of Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's probably not going to give me a fist bump because I'm not going to let him get by with that. So.
That's fair. Yeah. All right. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. Do you side with us? If you do, go to freethinkingministries.com/donate. I'm just kidding, but do go there.
Oh, good.
Do you side with us? Do you side with Neil? Do you side with the other guy? It was Charles, right? I think it's his name.
Charles, yeah.
Yeah. It was a really interesting conversation. You can watch the whole thing without us stopping and starting the conversation in the link below. And we do invite you to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss an episode. Like this video and share it with a Neil deGrasse Tyson fan. That is your homework. Share it with
Neil deGrasse Tyson if you can.
Yes. See if he will come on our show.
That's right.
We'll have a conversation. That would be fun. Yeah. And then I can yell at him about Pluto. Anyway.
That's the big issue. Let's do another video just about Pluto.
It really is. It really is. To me, it is. You know?
You can't just take Pluto away after growing up with Pluto.
Exactly.
Take it away.
It's rude.
Thanks a lot.
Anyway,
Neil.
Please do that. Thank you for tuning in. God bless. And as we say here at FreeThinking Ministries, stay reasonable.
Stay reasonable.